Dave's school that we'll also be sharing with you that is almost the same thing. We're going through just a head sculpt, getting into the ZBrush mini core to move some polygons around, have some fun, and come up with something that we can show our friends. My pleasure. The ZBrush mini core is very light on the keyboard shortcuts. It's really just got a handful of elements so that we can get into sculpting. ZBrush Core and ZBrush are very heavy on the keyboard shortcuts. We wanted to do something that was free for everybody so they could get in and have a little bit of fun with it. And ZBrush Mini Core was that solution. But I will cover a handful of the shortcuts that we have access to in Mini Core. I actually am astounded at how light the keyboard shortcuts are in ZBrush Mini Core. I try to use keyboard shortcuts in there sometimes that don't exist when I'm going over this stuff. So you might actually hear me mashing on my keyboard trying to pull up my brush menu, which there isn't a brush pop-up on this one, but I still try it. I believe so. Do you have an iPad? Okay, so real quick, if you have an iPad, it's easy. I can't remember the name of it. Give me 1 second. It is called Easy Something. Well, there's AstroPad. I've never used these, so I'm not sure how well they work. But I have a friend that has, I'm totally drawing a blank for the name of this particular piece of software. It's easy. I'll have to ask him and get that link to Nick as well. But AstroPad does what we're talking about. And that actually turns your iPad into a tablet for your PC or your Mac. Actually, I think it's just for your Mac. Now, I'm not going into it today, but if you have an iPad and you don't have an actual computer, there is relatively cheap this program called Nomad. It's Nomad Sculpt, and it is very, very similar to ZBrush with a ton of features. Just so you know it's there. All right, I would like to get back into this because I do have a limited time before I have to go to work. I do not speak Spanish. Nick, do we have somebody that would be able to translate? You're muted, sir.
Not at this time, Michael.
I think I don't.
Matthew Jackson says he can help. Matthew gets the Overachiever Award for today for helping out Mr. Hernandez. Thank you, Matthew.
Mr. Hernandez has left our group.
Okay.
All
Hey,
right,
Mike.
well,
This
Hello?
is the nursery, and I'm just testing if you're able to hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm looking from this class mostly is understanding the nuances of ZBrush Mini, because I've downloaded it on my touchpad, which is a mini computer SSD kind of thing, and I directly can use my fingers on the touchpad. So yeah, anything that you can teach in terms of principles would be perfect. All up to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, awesome. Hopefully I can make this pretty easily digestible and fun to use. Something that I will have off in the background is a bit of reference. Now, this is stuff that I've put together for myself.
It looks like Annabelle and you're perfect.
I have this reference usually for almost everything that I do. When I'm sculpting human anatomy, I'd like to think that I remember it all, and I know that I don't. So I keep a reference of it. This is for a character that I've previously worked on. Actually, I think I have. Here he is. So I did him for a video series.
Yes, they look awesome. In fact, human anatomy and working with virtual reality or augmented reality and sculpt those out is one of the toughest things. So yeah, let's get our hands ready.
It's a lot of fun. It's a never-ending process of learning and problem solving. So I
yeah,
keep
because
this
I
off.
guess it's anatomy. I'll shut up.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michael.
All right, so I keep this off to the side. So just know that on one of my monitors is always a reference image. Even if I'm not matching that, like I'm not going to make this guy today. I'm just going to make a human-like face. We're going to have a limited amount of time to go through it, so I'm just going to kind of cover the basis on how I work. And I'm going to start from this little sphere and hopefully work into something that's kind of fun. I'm mostly going to be using the Move tool and the Clay Buildup tool. And the way ZBrush Mini Core works is by using something called dynamic tessellation. And you've seen when I go over this, it starts to dynamically create geometry. And depending on the size of my brush and how zoomed in I am will depend on the type of density that it chooses to use for its dynamic tessellation. So if I go into a much bigger brush and I hit the Shift key for smoothing, you'll see that it reduces that geometry quite a bit. I'm going to start with actually, I'll just go through a couple of techniques that I like to use. I'm going to turn this off because I don't want to see those lines. And using that clay buildup brush, I will usually just rough in shapes. Maybe I want an ear there. Maybe I want a nose here. The barrel of the mouth, maybe I'll put there. Maybe I'll carve in some eye sockets. Maybe I'll carve in some cheekbones. We'll shape this a little better as well. But that's the clay buildup brush. It's a pretty handy brush, and I like what it does. But after I've gotten a bunch of stuff sculpted in, I'll go back in and smooth it. And I'm not afraid to lose what I've sculpted. Because I'll go in and I'll sculpt, I'll smooth, I'll sculpt, I'll smooth. And eventually I'll have something that looks similar to what I want. That's the clay buildup brush. I'll use the pinch brush to maybe sharpen stuff. I'll use the move brush to pull stuff around. The snake hook brush, I don't use it very often, but I can pull out some hair or something. Maybe I want him to have really big mustache. And the slash brush I use for carving in maybe some details. Now, by default, it does a subtractive type of draw. So shift, I use the shift key to smooth. But when I press the alt key, I can not carve out. I can actually, instead of carving out, I can carve, carving in, I can carve out. And then, you know, I might go in with my clay buildup and fill in those areas that I want a little bit more filled in. That's my set of brushes that I use. Now, real quick, I'll cover this hard polish brush, and then we'll get into actually sculpting something. This will actually polish, not necessarily to flat, but it'll sharpen edges and smooth, much like the actual smooth key. But the math behind it's a little different. So instead of like, all right, with my smooth brush, let me turn symmetry off and we'll be able to see what's going on. With my smooth brush, I'll press shift and hold it. It'll kind of smooth everything based on the angles of the geometry. So it averages out the normals. And the normals are, if we look at these polygons, if you looked at the center of a polygon and pretended there was a line drawn directly straight out from it, that would be the direction of those normals. This is going to be really hard to see with all this density. But with our polish brush, it's polishing them based on the brush. So it's adjusting the smoothness of it based on the brush direction. So now if I go up here, I can actually sharpen that crease along the edge where I'm polishing. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. I'm going to go ahead and create a new sphere. And we're going to get right into it. So when I start with a head, I tend to just use the move brush and get my shapes in there as closely as possible. So I'll start with a pretty big brush. We can adjust that right here. I'll just kind of squish this in. I'll use those open brackets and closed brackets to adjust the overall shape. And let's just pull out a chin. We'll pull out some shapes here. Broaden that a little bit. And I'll rotate from every angle because I don't want to see it from just one angle, or I might just end up sculpting it to where it only looks good from that angle. And then I'll switch to that clay buildup brush. I might make my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm going to start carving in. So I'm going to press the Alt key, carve in a little bit of a shape here for my eyes. I'm not going to worry too much about how smooth it looks. Pull out a nose. Again, I'm going to put a barrel of the mouth right in here. Maybe I'll have a bit of a chin. Maybe I want some ears back here, maybe right about here. And I think I'm going to want a neck. So I'll probably do that right about here. And once I get a little bit of geometry there, and I have something that I can grab a hold of, I might switch back to that move brush. And we'll just pull this out. So I'm going to want a bit of a throat. Just tweak this into position. Again, I'm working kind of quick. I might spend a little bit more time making sure that I have a decent amount of geometry or a bit of volume where I want it before I start pulling it out, but it doesn't matter. I'll just pull this out till I'm happy with it. I mean, that's mostly what it is, you know, until you start working for an art director, we're having fun. And you start working for an art director, they're going to start telling you, well, I want you to move this a little more or reduce that some. But we're still having fun. So I'm going to smooth this out a little bit. And I'm going to go back to that clay buildup brush. And I'm just going to work on getting some of my anatomy in here. So I know I have this little, area. And I'm going to pull some of these tendons down from the neck. Usually comes from behind the ear. Maybe I want some of this jaw. I'm just going to lay down some clay. He has an Adam's apple. You know, I get a bit of volume in there that I'm happy with, and I'll just go in there and smooth it out. Not going to worry about anything too much. I know we have some muscles back here, so we'll just rough those dudes in. And we're having fun. We're not really worried about how anything looks at this point, except for we tend to refer to it as squint factor. So if I squint my eyes, does it look like I want it to look? And if it does, then I'm happy. I'm going to use this move tool a lot. So if I want to continue to shape this guy, get in there, and maybe I want him more emaciated. Maybe I want him to have a really broad chin. Maybe I want him to be more dog-like. Maybe I want him to have a bigger forehead. You know, like Frankenstein.
Hey, Mike, can you change the skin tone to maybe something that's yellowish, golden?
Yeah,
like
I mean, we have a handful of options here. So I try to work in a very easy to see detail color. So I tend to work in a grayish or grayish green color for most of my sculpting. But I can change that to any color I want. When I'm done, then I can paint it with whatever color. Now in ZBrush Mini Core, you don't really get the painting option. It's really more for sculpting and 3D printing. So in order to get into poly painting where we're poly painting details, let me see. Skin shade would be a good one for maybe getting something that's fleshy. But you would just change your color here. Then we can smooth that out. And again, your tessellation is based on your brush size and how far or close you are to your model. So after you've gotten your shapes and you're really happy with it, we can go back to sculpting with that clay brush. And again, I have reference that I keep looking at. So you'll start seeing me carve in some of these muscle structures. Paying attention, I just kind of go with what I know, and when I don't, you might notice that I'll pause and I'll just kind of look up to my screen to see where I need to add some volume or get in there and do some details. So like right now, I'm going to add the ball of the nose. His nose is a little weak, so maybe I'll get in there and use that move brush again. Maybe we'll smooth it down so we don't have that crease so much. Maybe we want that little ridge of the nose like the old cartoon gangsters. A little bit more broad. Now with that move brush, I can use the Alt key to move it in the direction that the brush is facing. So if I press and hold the Alt key, I can move that out along that direction, and it locks it into that path. So maybe I want that a little more round. Okay. Shape that. Maybe I want that a little bit more like that. And then I'll go back to that clay brush, and I'll start adding some of the stuff that I want. Now, here in Minicore, we're using one piece of geometry. We don't have the luxury of multiple objects because it's really meant to just be a sculpting. I'm hungry. My stomach's growling. So we don't have multiple objects. So we would sculpt it like we would do with a hunk of clay. So maybe I want some eyes right about here. Go in there and smooth them out. Now, I'm going to move this area back. Push it in a little bit because I know that's how I want it. But I'm going to press that Alt key and move that in so that his eyes look like they belong in his head rather than just kind of pasted on there. I'm going to switch to the slash brush. I'm going to carve in some detail for his mouth. Remember, we can adjust the intensity here. I haven't messed with that at all, but play around with it, see what you like. Work some of these muscles that are here. Maybe I'll carve in right here. And I sculpt much like I sketch until I get more to where I want cleaner details. But I'm going to work on these ears so we can see what happens with these ears. So I'm just going to pull these out until I have enough geometry away from the head that I can start sculpting the earlobe and the anatomy around the ear, like the helix and the lobule and all the little things that make the ear. So I'm just going to fill this in until I'm ready. And then I'll start carving in once I have some volume to work with. Maybe I want that a little cleaner. And I'm going to grab that move brush again and just kind of move these until I'm happy. I'm going to jump back to that clay buildup brush. That's one of my favorite brushes. So I'll use this a bunch. So I'm going to pull this helix out and around from the ear. And I'm just going to get into the lobule here. And we start to get something that looks like an ear. You know, I might have to go in there, smooth it out. Maybe I have to go in there and sculpt some more detail, then smooth it out because I got ridges I don't want. Then I'm going to carve in right here. Get that concha in there. We got the little tragus thing right here. A little exaggerated for this example, but you can see what's going on. And I can keep working on that until I'm happy. I'm gonna move forward so that I can get through this before I have to leave, because my time is quickly running out. Go through and give myself a little bit of detail here. Now, when I look at this guy from the side, he's kind of flat-faced. I go back to that move tool. I'm just going to grab this right here at the corner of his mouth and pull it back. Kind of gives him a little bit more shape that maybe would fall over top of his skull. I think that looks all right. Maybe a little more. But mostly just tweaking it back and forth. I want to get into some of the stuff around the eyes and the nostrils. And then I'm going to have to hand this back over to Nick here soon. So maybe I would just come in here and give myself some eyelids. Maybe I have this meat that hangs over top of the eye. I'll be honest, I want to spend more time going over this, so maybe I will get to see all of y'all in a class where we can spend a lot more time with this. Carve in a bit of a pupil here. Maybe I want this little nodule here. I want that meat around the bottom part of the mouth. And as much as I'd like to keep going, I'm going to carve in these nostrils. I'm going to use up as much opportunity to talk about sculpting as possible until they kick me off of here, right, Nick?
That's right, Mike.
I hope I have given you a little bit of insight on how ZBrush Mini Core works so that you can have some fun with it. If you wanted to print, you can export by clicking this. Let me cancel this. By clicking this little button right here. And you can save it as an OBJ that you can load up onto a 3D printer. Again, I have recorded this video, and I have another video which is a little bit more thorough on the sculpting portion here that I will be sharing with Nick so that you guys can have, you guys and girls can have access to all the information that you got to see here. Hopefully this was fun, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. I have a few more minutes before I have to run out of here.
Any questions, folks?
Yes, I have one question, Nick and Mike. And it's very simple. Basically, I'm just trying to understand from anatomy point of view, if I were to focus on his features, is it a good thumb of rule to go ahead and focus on an elevation, meaning pulling out? And then once we are done with or satisfied with the contours and everything, then work on depressions, meaning pushing down. I kind of observed that knack you were doing when you were modeling his mouth, which is literally just lips, like there are no teeth or anything internal to it. So any advice you might have will help. Thank you.
So, all right, some of the reason why I only have lips and no teeth is due to the limitations of ZBrush Mini Core. It is really an entry into digital sculpting. If we were to look at ZBrush as a full-featured package, we have something that we can use that are very similar to layers. They're called subtools, so we can have multiple objects. If I wanted to have him with an open mouth, then I would actually sculpt it as if this was just one giant hunk of clay and that was all I had. So because it's free, we can give it to everybody, and we can get in there and really get a hang of how to navigate the interface, navigate the 3D viewport, and get a feel for sculpting.
Sure.
Here at the school,
Yeah,
we
that
actually
sounds
teach.
logical.
Here at the school, we actually teach ZBrush, which is fully featured. It has probably close to 180 brushes. You can go in and poly paint skin details. Nick, do you mind if I show them real quick what we actually teach, just the full featured version of ZBrush?
Sure, not a problem, Mike.
Okay.
Matthew Jackson also had a quick question. He wanted to know, could you animate what you just modeled?
We can. Now, we do have some limitations here in ZBrush Mini. Again, it's just for sculpting. But in the fully featured version of ZBrush, which, let me get this over here. It's on my other monitor. Oh. Didn't like something. Give me just 1 second. I think it's having an issue with both of them being open. Give me just 1 second. So before I do anything, one of the biggest things of 3D is saving. So I'm going to save this fella. And I will create a folder and give him a name. We'll call him Herman. And after that's closed, I'm going to just go ahead and exit out of here and get ZBrush open. It doesn't like, I think I have too much stuff open. I've got the recorder going on. I've got Big Blue Button open. I had Mini open. So let me get that over here. I think I might be having an issue with, there we go. All right, so this is ZBrush in all its glory. And let me open up.
So, Mike, while your software is booting and you're opening your models, I was just wondering, in this version of ZBrush, which is taught at Dave School, do they also teach about simulation, like hair simulation or basically fluid, liquidity?
Oh, yes. We teach all kinds of stuff for VFX, simulation, visualization, and gaming. So, yeah, for this guy, if we wanted to animate him, we would have to have a much lower poly count. So this is our animation cage. And if you look, he has a throat hole. If we were to open up his mouth, I can do stuff like masking. I'm doing it real quick. I would have to go in there and fix that. But then I would put teeth and gums and stuff in there. This would be animatable.
Okay, so basically, is it like the concept of layers that you're applying over here, or is it the dynamic tessellation that you mentioned earlier?
Well, so with ZBrush Mini Core, it's just using an algorithm to dynamically tessellate for the amount of geometry that you have to work with. Here in ZBrush, it's more than just a sculpting program. It's a 2.5D paint program. So it's got features like Photoshop, where you have brushes and you can smudge stuff and paint in 2D, as well as work with 3D objects. And then with the subtools, we can append more geometry. So I can switch between the geometry, sculpt on that, draw. Right now I'm in the 2D mode, so I can have all the power of a normal 3D program, so I can start having multiple objects and doing set up stuff for characters. I could build tanks, I could build robots, I could build props for a movie. But I can also set them up so that they can be animated or deformed or destroyed. You know, we blow stuff up in movies and games. So maybe we want to have stuff that we can destroy when we shoot it or blow it up or drive over it.
Sure, so it's nice to see in the menus so many, you know, from A to Z, all of them are nicely sorted out. I was just wondering if you would briefly tell us what the plugin means and what is it used for?
Sure. We have, okay, so this is, like I said, this is feature rich. This program is very versatile. Z plugin is tools that were written to aid you in stuff like UV mapping or a 3D print hub where you can set up the thickness of the walls or the size of the object and the different file types that you want to export out as. A multi-map exporter will allow you to export multiple maps. So if we were working on a game and I painted a skin texture, and actually I have some of these. Let me look. The monitor. We have all right, so for that fella that I showed you, we have all these different maps. So this would be a displacement map. This would be my normal map. This would be my texture map for the hair. Let me get to the skin. So we have an eyeball. And somewhere I have skin. There we go. So this would be my displacement map. For this, it's gonna take that low poly version, and as I divide it, the mesh stays kind of smooth. Well, when I apply the displacement map, it moves the mesh outward in the white areas and inward in the darker areas. Now I can go into Photoshop and invert this map and use it for a specular map. I can adjust the levels of it to use it as a roughness map. And our roughness map is basically how glossy or matte a finish is. Specular is how speckly, or how the light reflects off of it. Normal map is going to fake a lot of that. Let me see if I can get in there. That little micro details, so like a lot of the skin pores. I don't know if that's showing up on the screen well, but those little details, I don't need to have that geometry in there. The more dense the geometry is, the longer it takes to process or render. So we fake it. It's all smoke and mirrors, right? And I have my subsurface scattering. So this map is applied to the model so that, when you have a flashlight and you put it behind your hand, you can see that area through it, or when you're looking at a person's face, you can see the light shine through their ears, or it turns that area red where it's thinner.
So basically, I'm just trying to understand, Mike, is Will this texture map be useful for creating different kinds of visions, like X-ray vision that Superman has, or where you can actually go ahead and see the internals when it doesn't have to be necessarily alpha, but different kinds of powers.
So that's a very open-ended question. Yes is the short answer. We can do just about anything with maps in our render engines, whether it's a game engine or a render engine like Redshift or Arnold inside of Maya. It's a mix of 3 different classes to give you the direct answer. You would have to go through the texturing class and the composition class to really get an idea of what you can do with these, but your possibilities are endless.
I understand. Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Regretfully, I have another job that I have to get to, and they are relying on me today. But I hope this has been exciting and fun for everybody.
Michael, I want to thank you for your time this morning. You really, I learned a lot just in the short time we were with you, and looking forward to continuing to build on this throughout the year, sir. So thank you very, very much, gang. I'm going to switch gears now as Michael exits stage right. Mike, I'll talk to you early next week, sir.
Real quick, Nick.
Yeah.
Karina, yes, you smooth by pressing shift. I didn't want that to go unanswered. Thank you again, everybody, for hanging out and watching. And Nick, I will see you next week.
You got it, my friend. Have a great weekend too, Michael.
Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you.